Welcome to the Clear to Send podcast, a podcast about wireless engineering, where we educate you on Wi-Fi technology, talk about design tips, troubleshooting, interviews, and the tools. Here are your hosts, Roel and Francois.
Hey everybody, welcome to a brand new episode of the Clear to Send podcast. I am your host, Roel Dionisio, and I am joined by my co-host, Francois Burgess. How are you, Francois?
I'm very good. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. This time around, we're both on recording. We've been both busy, and we're actually recording with a huge time delay, but somehow it's working out because I'm an owl and I don't go to sleep, and it's morning where you're at.
Yeah. Perfect. 2 different days.
Yeah, that's kind of weird thinking about it. We're recording on different days, but it's great to have you on this episode, and I'm kind of excited about it because I don't have too much experience in today's topic of warehouse Wi-Fi. Last episode we talked about lecture hall Wi-Fi, and that was with me and Robert Boardman. And this week we're talking about warehouse, and I've done maybe warehouse once, but at that time I actually left that organization before I could complete it. But interested to get your thoughts and opinions on this. But before we talk about warehouse Wi-Fi, why don't we talk about the one bit of news that we have to share with everybody? I'll let you dive into that one, Francois.
Yeah, so Wi-Fi training.com is releasing a free Wi-Fi a training series of videos. It's called the Rockstar Wireless Networking.
All right, Rockstar.
And it's gonna come out pretty soon. They have a date. I think it's 21st of May. But if you register on the website wifitraining.com, you can probably get the content sooner. So it's 8 hours of HD videos, and they have different modules. RF fundamentals, security designing, troubleshooting, basics. So basically, it's designed to give an overview of what Wi-Fi is, how it works. So it can be good for network engineers, but also for decision makers if they want to better understand Wi-Fi, working on the Wi-Fi projects, and I guess take better decisions. So I've worked on it. Rasika worked on it, and Chris worked on it. Chris Evans. So,
all right, you got your lead rock stars.
Chris did the most of the work, but it's really good. It gives a really good idea of what Wi-Fi is for someone that doesn't really know. So yeah, please feel free to register on the website wifitraining.com. It's just creating an account, and then you have access to the videos for free. So that's the news for this week.
Yeah, awesome. I'm looking forward to those videos. So I'm gonna sign up, and I can't wait to watch them because it's always good to get a refresher from someone who learning from somebody else who's gone through a lot of years of experience with Wi-Fi. And then it's another new training provider out there, Wi-Fi training. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the feedback that people can give us, and yeah, I'm excited about it. It's been a lot of work in the background. Mm-hmm. So if we can get good feedback, that would be good.
Awesome. Yeah. So if you guys check out those videos, be sure to leave some feedback for Francois and the folks at Wi-Fi Training. So I want to go ahead and dive into warehouse Wi-Fi because warehouses in general, they're large buildings. They have high ceilings, but then there's a lot of inventory that's kept in a warehouse. They have a whole set of different requirements that's completely different from an office environment, and they use equipment that's not necessarily the equipment that you and I use in the office. They're typically not your most updated pieces of equipment either. Am I right, Francois?
Yes. And it's a total different environment as well. When you're designing for an office, you you know what to expect, right? You can have cubicles, offices,
Hmm.
drywalls, sometimes glass, staircase, elevators. You have an idea of what to expect. In a warehouse, you don't really know, right? It can be They can be making cheese, making milk. They can be making auto parts. It could be like stocking for um, um, a regular, I don't know, you know, store,
Yeah,
whatever. So
retail
you
environment.
don't really know.
The warehouse I've
Yeah,
worked in, they were a retail environment that sold a lot of metal, and that type of metal was your refrigerators, your ovens, high retail type stuff for your homes. So their shelves were full of metal, and that was a tough RF environment because, as you guys know, it, RF just gets reflected all over the
yeah,
place.
yeah. You know, so you don't really know what to expect until you get there or you get to talk to the customer and they tell you, this is what we have, this is what we do. And, sometimes you can have like in the same warehouse, you can have different areas where they do different stuff. So you can have like open areas or you can have very tight racking space. So it's going to affect your design, right? So it's im- it's I like it because it's sometimes it's challenging. So challenging means you have to think a little bit more, and it's better for us, I guess.
Yeah, it's always a good challenge for an RF engineer, a wireless professional, to go into something that's a little bit different than, your outdoor wireless or your office or campus. But you wanted to touch upon a couple of different sections, and some of these might be different or very different for a lot of the listeners here because these topics are one, safety, design, survey, and prep work. And so I'm curious about the safety part in the warehouse
Yeah,
when you do Wi-Fi there. Why don't you step into those topics, Francois?
yeah. I put safety first because it's really important in a warehouse. Um, that's what I noticed with all the work I've done in warehouses. Um, it, you know, always it's important to always remember that you are not working, you are working in someone else working space,
Hmm.
right? So you go somewhere, you're working, of course you're working, but you're not working, it's not your space, it's someone else's space, so you have to respect that, right? So this is true for any Wi-Fi, but especially for warehouse Wi-Fi, right? So I always, when I do work in a warehouse, I always try to be very respectful to the employees
Hmm.
and let them do their work before I do mine, right?
Okay,
So if someone is coming with a lift truck or something, you stop, you acknowledge, you look at them, you can shake your head, you can say hi, and then I let them do their work, and then I continue mine,
I see. Yeah, you don't want
right?
to get in the way of them because,
Yeah, I don't want to disrupt basically. Um,
yeah, you're
if
the
sometimes you have
foreigner in
to.
that environment. You're the
Yeah,
outsider.
I'm the intruder. Yeah, exactly. That's how I see myself, and so I act accordingly. And usually, I don't have any issue. Um, and I've had like really good times in warehouses. If you just respect them and then be nice with them and say hi and everything, it's incredible. They're going to be super nice with you. And I've had like wonderful times, in way better times in warehouses than in a typical carpeted office environment.
Yeah, I would say a
Yeah.
warehouse environment, the actual people, they're very different from office workers.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And you can have a lot of fun. One day, some guy was even playing music for me in the whole warehouse. That was funny.
Like he was playing a
Anyway,
musical instrument or just
um,
playing music over some speakers.
like, yeah, he was playing. He was always playing music, and I was in his. It was a huge warehouse, so I was there for maybe 4 days, 3 or 4
Oh
days,
wow, that's a
and
huge warehouse.
then yeah, yeah, it was a big warehouse, and then so and then one day I come up to him and like, oh, you listen to this music, and he was listening to French music. I was like, okay, and then he every time I was passing by, he was putting French music for me, so it was fun.
That's cool. Very accommodating. All right, what else
Yeah.
about safety should one person look out for if they're gonna do Wi-Fi in a warehouse?
So sometimes you have to take safety training. It happened to me once where, okay, before I started my work, they put me in front of a computer, and then you have, a series of questions, how to handle this part, how to handle this part. They had like a special code for emergencies,
Mm-hmm.
what number to call, um, a whole bunch of different safety codes that you had to follow. So maybe that's something you can ask your customer in advance. Am I going to have to go through a safety training, because it takes some time, right? So you want to plan for it.
Okay.
In my case, I think it took about an hour.
Yeah, that's a big
So you
chunk of
want to
time.
plan for it. Yeah. But it's
Maybe
it's
that's something you
required
could
by
coordinate before you get on site as well.
uh, maybe. I done it when I was on site, but you can probably, if it's convenient for you to go on site, on a previous day or something, and
Mm-hmm.
do it before. Yeah, it's probably possible. Um, I only did it once, but I'm guessing it depends on the company.
Yeah.
You might do it more often
Yeah,
with different
it
companies.
could be a policy of the company that anyone that's gonna be in that warehouse has to know the rules
Yeah,
and be trained on in how to work in that warehouse. So that makes sense.
yeah, and then you have the safety equipment. So usually boots are as required, and then in some cases safety glasses, hard hat, and a safety jacket. I always bring the safety jacket with me because I like orange anyway.
That's your usual
But no,
outfit.
even if the customer, even if they don't wear anything in the warehouse, I like to wear it so they know they see me, and they know I'm here working, right? But anyway, so the safety glasses, the boots, the safety jacket, I always bring it with me because it doesn't really take space except the boots, but I need the boots anyway. And then
Mhm.
the hard hat, I only take it when it's needed, really needed. So I ask the customer and they tell me yes or no. Sometimes if you don't have it, they just lend it to you.
Mhm.
Um, in some cases, if the factory is making food products, they're gonna give you like a full a jacket, white jacket, something to protect your hair, the full kit.
Oh,
If
okay.
you have a beard, they give you something to protect your beard.
Yeah, they gotta
So
protect that cheese from getting any hair in
exactly, and
there.
then you have to wash your hands every time you're going from one section to another section. So
Oh yeah,
just make sure you consider all
contamination.
this stuff when you plan. Yeah, consider all this stuff when you plan, because it might add delay in your work. So you want to plan for it uh, you know if you're billing for it.
How about the handling of
Um,
your equipment? Like if you're doing AP on a stick.
yeah, so if you're doing IP on a stick, you can, depending on the ceiling height, you can use like a pole that goes as high as you can, or you can use I've used a sky jack
Hmm.
in the past. So you pretty much attach I attach my stick usually to the sky jack, and then I from the floor I raise up the sky jack, right? And then you move the skyjack wherever you want, in whichever location you want. So for the skyjack, usually you need a license for it
Okay, yeah, that's
to
what I
be
was gonna
able
get
to
into.
handle
Is
it.
that a big piece of machinery that you have to use? The Skyjack?
No, the one I've used are pretty small. Usually they have them on site. Um, if you need to use them, you need to make sure that do they have one? Can I use it? If I can use it, am I gonna have to rent one? That's another deal. I've never had to rent one. Usually the customer is nice enough to lend it to me or let me use it. I haven't used Skyjack a whole lot. Sometimes they will assign an employee to you,
Mm-hmm.
and then the employee would take care of the Skyjack, and you take care of
Oh,
the
okay.
of your work.
Well, that sounds
So
better. I'd be kind of scared to operate one on my own, and I guess that's where the big safety concern is, right? You're giving a someone who's not an employee access to use equipment, and then they could, get hurt or
yeah,
fall or hurt somebody else.
yes. And that's, if you're working for yourself, that's where insurance is important, right? Because if something happens in a warehouse and then, I don't know, something falls and then you break some inventory, some stock, it's on you, right? So
Yeah, yeah, you're liable for
um,
that.
yeah, you need to be covered on this side as well. So um, but yeah, and then if you're going to handle the skyjack, you need a harness. So same thing again. Do I bring mine? Do they have one? Usually I bring mine because it looks they always have one on site, but if you bring your stuff, it looks more professional, and it's always a better thing, I think, to be equipped.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's safety. And also when you walk in a warehouse, sometimes you have walking path.
Hmm.
And so my rule is to always take the walking path whenever I don't really have to go anywhere else. So if I'm walking from one section to another section, but I'm not really doing a survey,
Hmm.
I'm taking the walking path. But if I'm doing a survey, obviously I have to walk everywhere, right? So that's where you have to go out of the walking path, and you have to be very careful about all the traffic in the warehouse.
Okay.
The lift trucks and everything.
Yeah. Cool. Well,
Um,
that's a lot on safety. I think there's a lot more in terms of safety, but usually it's dependent on the environment, the company, and what their safety training is. I mean, this is not an end all on safety as far as it goes, but these are good tips from
yeah,
you who's had experience going into these environments. How about we dive into now the technical piece of Wi-Fi? Let's start with design. How do you even
yeah.
start with design for a warehouse?
So design. Well, usually in the warehouse you have different structure within the building, right? So you usually have part of the building that are office space. So it's going to be either on one floor or on two floors, sometimes on three floors, depending on the size of the warehouse.
Hmm.
And so what I do usually, I design this section differently from the rest of the warehouse because they don't have the same requirements, right? So they won't have the same clients, they won't have the same application, the same density, and it's not the same environment,
Yeah,
like ceiling heights and everything like this. So
yeah, and they'll
I
probably have
usually design a
drywall and
different.
those.
Yeah, it's usually typical, carpeted environment, dry walls and everything. So um, usually you don't use the same type of APs. I would design it a little bit differently, and then you have the rest of the warehouse. Um, you need to look for stuff like what's the ceiling height. It can vary a lot from one warehouse to another. Um,
Now, when
yeah.
you're designing this in Ekahau, do you have it as two separate project files, or are you putting it within the same project file and it's a different floor in your project?
I've done both.
Okay.
Uh, it just gets it depends on the size of the office, because if the office is small comparing to the rest of the warehouse, you have to choose your alignment points.
Yeah.
It's harder. And sometimes too you're gonna have different location for offices within the warehouses. So you can have a warehouse and then you can have three different location for offices. So in this case you have to separate them. You
Okay.
see what I mean?
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes it complicated
uh,
as far as that designing aspect within Ekahau, and then it would sometimes just be easier to separate out those files and work it that way. And then
yeah,
later on, I guess you could merge them if you can get the alignment points down properly.
yeah. And but if you separate them, you still have to be careful about the bleed you're gonna get from the APs you install in the office. What type of bleed am I gonna get in the warehouse, and you still have to think about that.
Hmm.
But it's not always just straightforward, simple. It depends on the floor plan, and sometimes you have crazy stuff.
Yeah, I mean that's
um,
why warehouses are really interesting and challenging than office environments.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, so that's one thing. Ceiling height. Ceiling height might vary sometimes. So you can have one section of the house that's way higher, and then all the rest is a little bit lower.
Hmm.
So make sure you know which one, which which height is where. Um,
And then you have
t-
the racks as well. They
yeah,
some racks go all the way up to the ceiling, and then some don't. So that also affects your design. And when you're doing it in Ekahau, you want to actually set the height of the
yeah.
racks in the file.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point because the racks are going to bring the most obstructions to the signal in a warehouse usually. So um, it's important to know the height of the racks. I worked on this warehouse. There was a company. They were moving to a bigger warehouse. So when I did the initial visit on site to measure or to get a sense of the environment, they didn't have anything installed. It was like a empty warehouse. And so what they did, they gave me the floor plan of how they were going to install everything. And then they told me the racks are going to be, um, 15 feet tall.
Hmm.
So I designed my stuff for 15-foot tall racks. And then they had a section where the racking was a little bit more dense. So, I planned for a little bit more APs to cover everything. And then so they installed everything. I go back on site for the validation. And then we found out that, the section where the racking were a little bit denser, the racks were only they were only like 6 feet tall.
Yeah.
So that changes everything, right? And then so we ended up taking down APs because we had too many. So it's important to know the different rack, the height of the racks, the different height,
Hmm.
so you can better design.
Yeah, and you'll
Yeah.
probably talk about this later too. That's why it's important to do that validation survey afterwards, because then that things might have changed between your design and afterwards when all the furniture's in.
Yeah. Uh, and yeah, the stock can move in a warehouse. You can have a lot, and, you know, little. So you want to try to plan as much as you can for that as well in your design.
Yeah, and I think the most
So
challenging part in the design too is what goes into the racks, and trying to
yeah,
accommodate that into into Ekahau on what are they putting in the racks, and how do I ad- adjust in Ekahau that attenuation. And I'm assuming you've done your own test too in certain warehouse environments what the signal would look like, since you've done some AP on a sticks. You try to see, okay, let me see what this attenuation is between the racks here in the different aisles, and seeing how far does that signal bleed between their inventory, for example.
yeah, you measure the attenuation of the racking, and then you can put in Ekahau. Or if you're doing AP on the stick, you measure a couple of aisles, and then you get a sense of how it's gonna look like. Um, and then you can replicate, the design, and then during the validation, you make sure that it works. So yeah, so it's important to know what's in the racks.
Yeah.
Is it like liquid stuff like wine, or alcohol, or milk or something, or is it more something like metal or wood, something dense, or is something not dense, right? So, and then also the width of the racking, are they large, are they
Mhm.
small? um so
Okay.
all of this is important, yeah.
And how do you
um
design for the devices? Can you tell us what kind of devices you run into in these warehouse environments? I'm sure they're not running, the latest and greatest 802.11 AC chips on whatever scanner guns they're using, for example, or maybe they're using something other than scanner guns in warehouse environments.
so typically what I see is yes, RF, scanners, RF scanners. It's like a handheld device, and they use it to scan inventory, scan barcodes, and it goes back to their. They have like a warehouse management system,
Hmm.
warehouse database management system where they handle all the stocking. Um, so this is the one device. Also, sometimes on the lift trucks they have computers. It's like an embedded computer in the lift truck, and then
Oh, okay.
they have they have a scanner connected to it, so they can also scan barcodes with it. And usually these devices are running Windows CE,
Yeah.
um, and then they have applications on it to configure the Wi-Fi. The one I've seen around the most often is called Summit.
Hmm.
That's used to connect to the drivers, basically to connect to the Wi-Fi.
Is
Uh,
it typically 2.4 only?
no, I've seen five. I see 5 gigahertz more and more.
Okay, that's
The
early.
thing with warehouses, yeah, the thing with warehouses, I think their life cycle is longer on their
Oh yeah,
equipment, so
definitely.
they don't change it as often. So you're gonna see some legacy
Yeah.
stuff. I've seen
Usually
some
only when it breaks.
only when it works, yeah, and it's not built to break, right?
Yeah, those are tough devices. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've seen some B clients in warehouses.
Okay. So
That was
B's
because
not dead yet. It's still there.
I've seen Bs, and then so um, because you have B clients, you need to keep the B, configured in your APs, and it slows down everything, and you know, um, speed is not really uh, an issue in warehouses because these devices don't need a lot of bandwidth,
Yeah, they're
right?
scanning something. It's either they're taking out inventory to start shipping, and that just needs to put that into their inventory database as marked as okay, this is leaving inventory and really quick transactions.
Yeah, yeah. So you want coverage, and you want a smooth roaming as well,
Okay.
right? If you have that, you should be okay. Um, and then when I tell my customer, whenever you buy new equipment, make sure it's 5 gig.
Yeah. So
So you
speaking of coverage and roaming, do you use omnidirectional APs? Do you use directional antennas? Uh, Ceiling mounted or wall mounted? What's your style, or does it depend on the environment
yeah,
there?
depend on the environment. I usually uh, I usually use directional antennas for warehouses, um, because you can focus your signal wherever you want.
Hmm.
With high ceilings, it's important. Um, if you use if with high ceilings, if you use omnidirectional antennas, you're gonna have a really good signal high in the air, but not that much on the floor.
Hmm.
There's because it's a pretty much open space. When you get to the ceiling, all these APs are gonna see each other, so
Yeah.
the you're gonna create interference. Or if you have RM activity, the arm, it's gonna reduce all the transmit powers, so you're not going to get much
Yeah,
on
it's
the
not going to be
floor.
good for those scanner guns. Yeah.
Yeah, so you want to focus the RF down the aisles where your clients are, so directional antennas are the best for that.
Okay.
um, After that, do you mount it on the ceiling or on the wall? um, I, li- I like it on the ceiling most of the time. Sometimes you can't. When they handle big machineries, sometimes they on the ceiling they have a heavy duty material that you can move, and you can install anything because it's moving, right? Let's say the company is building a car. They're going to have something to lift the car and move the
Oh
car,
wow.
right?
Yeah.
And this thing is attached to the ceiling, and so you won't have any options. So you have to study your options according to the environment. Sometimes in the ceiling you have a lot going on as well, so you need to lower down the antenna. Um, and then if you use a directional antenna, you need to work on the orientation and where you want to focus the signal. Do I tilt my antenna? How much degrees into which direction? Um, so yeah, that's important to do as well,
Okay. How so
depending on the type of antenna you have on the beam width. And yeah.
so after identify all this, how and they've got the deployment. How about the survey part? Can you talk about how your validation surveys go and any other aspect about doing a survey at the site,
Yeah.
what to look for?
So something I didn't mention yet, but it's very important is floor plans. Um, because sometimes in warehouses you get empty floor plans, and
Just a
it's
big
very
white
hard,
box.
like a big white box, and it's very hard to get around if you don't have anything to know where you are.
Yeah, the orientation of which direction are you facing? Are you walking in the right?
Exactly, and usually it's like where a warehouse is a big place, right? So
You don't want to redo
it's
that
a
survey all the time.
yeah, it's a lot of space, and you don't know where you're on the map. So try to get floor plans, up to date. Sometimes you get floor plans, but the racking don't match,
Hmm.
right? Because they've changed the racking, so it's a little bit of a challenge sometimes. You have to, what I do usually is I study the floor plan. Does it match the reality? And if it doesn't match, I try to modify it or mark it so I know where I am, and then I know what's real. So when I'm doing my survey, I know where to click on the map, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
there's this door. I can see this door. Okay, this is real. I'm here. You click, and then you get a better sense of where you are, right?
And
So floor plans are important.
and then do you measure usually that measurement of the scale comes with the floor plan or the CAD file. Do you also measure the height? What do you use to measure the height of the
Yeah,
ceiling? Use one of those laser
yeah. The
measurement
best is
tools?
the laser tool. Um,
Yeah,
I bought one
not a
recently
really
on
long
Amazon.
measuring tape.
No, I used to use the a wheel, measuring wheel.
Yeah,
'Cause you can go pretty long distances with it, but it's not convenient to measure ceiling height, right?
right. I guess you could use a
So
skyjack along the wall and then go up.
has become technical. Becomes technical.
That's more fun.
But no, the laser is the best tool because what I yeah, and I take a lot of measurement. Just like it, it's fun. But what you can do is you can measure the ceiling height, and then under the ceiling you usually have the stud where you're gonna install your the AP and the antenna or the
Hmm.
beam. So you can also measure the height of this uh, you know, beam. So you in Ekahau you can feed better information in Ekahau, and you can get a better design at the end. Or if you're using,
Okay.
uh, you know, air magnet or
What,
IV wave, you
what
can feed better information.
for the laser tool? What distance do you recommend? Because some of these laser tools have a max distance that they'll go. Should they
Yeah,
be? Should you get the largest, the farthest distance you can get for a laser tool? I mean, sometimes those can be pretty expensive.
yeah. The one I have goes to 80 meters.
Okay,
Um, so in feet, I'm not too sure. I think it's 100,
it's a lot of feet.
200 feet. I'm not too sure, but yeah, it goes
Yeah, it's
far. And
262 feet.
262 feet. So you barely see him. You barely see the little red light
You
at this
can't see
point.
the
I'm
red.
telling you, and it's very shaky at the end. Um, but yeah, this is way enough. You know, I've
Okay.
never had really. Yeah, and then yeah, usually what I do is I look in Google Map. I When I imported the first time with Google Map, I look like at the size of the building,
Hmm.
and then I scaled it that way, and then I adjust it when I go on site, and then I can measure with the laser. I adjust it
Okay.
uh, with the exact distance, and then you try to take the longest as you can. But it's 80 meters is way enough. I don't think you need more.
Yeah,
And
that would be a huge warehouse going that high.
yeah, well, sometimes it's big. It's big. Um, the Gigafactory for Tesla. I would
Yeah.
love to know who did that. Who designed the Wi-Fi for that?
You'll probably find out. They got a
Yeah, and
factory just down the freeway from me.
yeah.
That could be their headquarters. I don't know. It says Tesla big on the wall, but I don't. I don't know if they make the cars there. They probably do. So
Oh,
what else
all
about the
right.
survey? Like,
You see,
do you
you
go
should.
when you do a survey? Do you get through with the single walk with a full battery? Are you able to complete your survey, or do you have to have one of those portable chargers with you?
No, yeah, the battery on your laptop is usually the limitation for me. Um, some people have multiple batteries, um, uh, or multiple laptops. I don't know. I just use one laptop. So usually, what I do is I just I do some work or I do some survey or whatever, and then when it's time to recharge, I take my break or I do some documentation, I do something else,
Hmm.
and then I plan my work like this, um, around it basically.
Yeah, you just split off the job uh, because of the battery life. Yes, for some reason, like when you mention having multiple laptops, I think of like a photographer who just needs another camera real quick because the memory ran out, and someone like you have an
Yeah,
assistant that's just there with a laptop, like here you go,
yeah,
complete that survey.
yeah. Well, it could work,
Yeah, do you usually do
it could
these by
work.
yourself, or you have someone to help you out?
Um, I I've done it by myself, except once I had someone with me, so we split the job. Um, yeah, we split the job in two because I think it was a 1 million square foot house.
Oh, jeez.
1 million square foot, yeah, warehouse, so it was pretty big. And talking about planning too, what I do usually, I ask the customer, um, what the shift looks like, when do they work, when do they take their break, when would be the best time to work in which, in specific section of the warehouse.
Hmm.
Because I know usually in the in the where they have the docking the dock stations where they load the trucks,
Yeah.
the loading dock stations, I guess. It's very busy. You have a lot of lift truck traffic, and the lift truck goes in and outside of the truck, and it can be dangerous, right?
Okay.
So I usually try to see with them, okay, so when is it quiet, or when is the best time for me to do the work
Yeah. You mean you just
on
don't
this?
walk in the middle of them loading the truck and say, "Stop, guys!
Yeah,
I'm trying to make
and
Wi-Fi better for you."
it makes it easier for them, and it makes it easier for me as well.
Yeah, because
Um,
those trucks just go in and out. You just
yeah,
hear
they
it.
go,
You don't necessarily
and then
see it.
exactly, and they honk all the time. So you're like, toot, toot. You
Yeah,
hear that all the
they're
time, but
expecting you to move
uh,
out of the way.
exactly. And then if you're doing a survey in a continuous mode, you know that you have to try to walk at the same pace.
Right. Yeah.
You have to click all the time.
Yeah. So when you
Um,
jump and dive, you gotta click at the same time, right? So
exactly.
should probably put a red light on you too, so that way people can see.
So the advantage is that warehouses usually they open all day long,
Oh yeah.
7 day a week, right? So you can easily work around the schedule. So when I do warehouses, I don't mind working, at night, not at night, but like evenings, um, and get, job done when you have less traffic in the warehouse.
Okay.
Um, the only thing is that sometimes the light goes off, and then the warehouse is black, and then it's automatic lighting, right? So as you walk through, the light just starts
Turning on,
shining.
off.
But yeah, so yeah, I usually try to plan with the customer. Okay, when is the best time for me to go to this section without disrupting too much your work, and then you can plan your schedule like this.
Okay. Yeah, that's very good information. How about you talked about the design and the survey. Like, what goes into prepping for a warehouse survey? Like, before you even head out there, before you fly, how do you prep for
Yeah,
this?
well, it depends what type of survey you do, right? Do you do an AP on the stick, or is it a validation survey? Is it the first visit on site to get a sense of what the environment is, to measure your attenuations and stuff like this? So sorry, depending on what type of survey you're going to do, you're going to prepare differently. But the equipment obviously is important and is more heavy than if you were doing a typical office environment. So you want to know, do I have my APs? Do I have the right type of APs? If I need external antennas, do I have APs that support external antennas? And then, do I have external antennas? And which type do I have? Which type do I need? You want to prepare all this stuff in advance. And then obviously all the specific equipment you need in a warehouse. So, high ceiling pole if you need one, or try to arrange a skyjack if you need one. External antenna, hard safety jacket, harness. And when I do a AP on a stick, I always take duct tape and tie wrap with me, because you never know. Can be useful. So all this type of equipment, or the measuring tool. This is all the stuff you want to prepare in advance and have ready for you with you. The floor plan also. If you notice the floor plan is empty, maybe you can ask your customer, okay, do you have a better version? Sometimes they're going to tell you no. So you go inside and you try to see what's there. Sometimes I even modify the floor plan myself.
I can see that a lot of modification would go in, right? Because when they first go in, they planned out where all the shelving, the racks will be, and then maybe down the road, after a couple months or so, they find a way that, oh, it's more efficient if we put these racks here and these racks here, and things change, and no one necessarily updates those floor plans, because I assume not many people even have access to floor plans.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes they're just renting the building. So the floor plan is owned by the owner, but the owner doesn't know what type of racking you're going to put in.
Right.
So the owner just have an empty floor plan.
Yeah, big empty rectangle.
Yeah. So yeah.
The one thing I can think of when you think about, okay, do I need to rent a piece of equipment such as a skyjack, is to also consider looking up where you could rent it if you're gonna have to rent one, because I know some warehouses in California are kind of out in the middle of nowhere, and maybe the next closest rental site is miles away, and that would take up half of your day if you had to wait for it to get to the site.
And also, if you rent it, can they deliver it at the place, or do I need a truck to deliver it at the place? So, I've never had to rent one so far. So
and that would be
but
a
if
big
you have
unexpected
right?
cost too, to rent
Yeah.
something like that and have it delivered if you don't have the transportation for a skyjack, for example. So a lot of things to consider. And probably you went through a lot of lessons learned, right, after your first couple warehouses.
For the skyjack thing, I think it's more like it would be more like a safety concern, or internal policies, because they usually always have one on site to change a light bulb or something, right? For maintenance. So if they don't have anything internally that prevent you to use it, or have an employee to use it for you, you should be able to borrow, or use the one they already have on site. It doesn't really make sense to bring one if there's one, but
that's
maybe
that's
a smaller warehouse. You never know.
Cool. Was there anything else that you want to talk about in regards to warehouse Wi-Fi? I think you mentioned quite a lot of things with prep work, how you do the surveys, what you look for, and how you do your design, and also even down to the safety, because that would probably be the number one concern for the client.
Yeah, I know it was hard to think about everything preparing for this episode, but I would also mention yeah, it's good stuff. I would also mention, try to take as much picture as you can. Just when you're not on site and you're analyzing your data or you're doing your report or something, you have something that you can use to remember, okay, what does the ceiling looks like here?
Yeah.
And then you can go back to your pictures and be like, okay, no, maybe if I move my AP here, yes, I can install it here. Oh no, here there's a big AC
There's a
system in the
big
ceiling,
fan.
or heating system, a big fan. So yeah, take a lot of pictures, and that's going to help you in the analysis later. Or even if your customer has a question, can we move this AP here? You can say, okay, let me see, and then you go back to your pictures, and you can better help your customer, basically.
Awesome.
So yeah, pictures, panoramic pictures are great for warehouses.
That'd be a huge panoramic picture if you've got that large warehouses that you're doing.
Yeah.
For some reason, I feel like you're
Oh,
doing surveys for Amazon or something. That's the kind of
also
warehouse
some,
I picture.
yeah. Well, I think Amazon, they have robots, right?
Oh yeah, completely automated warehouse.
Yeah, and I worked for a warehouse one day, and they wanted to design for this type of devices. They call it automated vehicle. I forgot the name. They had a name for it, and yeah, so they wanted to design for this type of equipment for the future.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
think
interesting. I think interesting stuff are coming up in warehouses.
oh yeah, definitely, because they could operate 24/7. There's no one has to be there, and I think Lego actually uses uh like completely automated devices. I remember seeing something. I think it was on Netflix about Lego, and even if you were to step in front of one of those forklifts, it would know someone there's an object there, and it would stop, and it would wait or go
Yeah.
around you. But yeah, it's kind of interesting how all that works, and whether that's working on a wireless system or something else. That'd be interesting to know. But yeah, I think that completely wraps up this episode. You mentioned a lot about warehouse Wi-Fi, honestly, and I didn't even think about the safety portion, which would be very important. And then you provided some good tips. Is there anything else you want to add before we end the show?
I didn't talk about AP installation. It's very important to, I guess, to provide the good information to your installers, because I've seen a lot of crazy stuff in warehouses, like APs with antennas not connected to the AP, or APs sitting on top of the light up in the ceiling. Maybe we'll share some pictures in the show notes, but yeah, AP installation is important. You can go
Awesome.
ahead and close. Wow, sorry.
Oh no worries. That's I think seeing some of the funny photos would be interesting because that definitely a bad fi if it's way up there in the ceiling. But
Yeah.
why don't you tell
Sometimes
everyone?
we were looking for AP, we couldn't.
No, sorry. Go ahead. There's a big gap between us talking since you're in a different country.
Okay.
What were you gonna say?
I was saying sometimes I was validating a Wi-Fi, and I was looking for an AP, and I knew the AP was close by because I could see it on my survey software, and I couldn't see the AP. So we took a skyjack, and the AP was sitting on top of the light. It's like a big industrial light, and it's a rectangle industrial light,
Oh,
and
so
the AP was sitting right on top of it.
so it's
On the
providing
middle
signal
shelf.
for
Yeah,
the
so
roof.
yeah, exactly. So anyway, so you get stuff like this sometimes.
Yeah, I would imagine that some people would just install it because it's just easy, right? Like Wi-Fi, it works. Let me just put it right here. This is the only place where I can put it.
I think in this case, the installer just said, "Okay, I'll finish this one later," and just let it sit
Let it-
on the light, and then they forgot about it.
Anything where someone says this is going to be temporary always becomes a permanent installation. No one ever goes back to it.
Yeah.
All right, why don't you tell everyone where they can find you online, Francois?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Tell everyone where they can find you online if they want to reach out to you.
Okay, so I can be found on Twitter, Verges Francois, my last name and my first name. And I also have a blog, samfionetwork.com/blog.
Awesome. And you guys can find me at RoeldinECO on Twitter, and head over to the show notes, cleartosend.net/77, where we'll have all the kind of the notes that Francois talked about and some of the tools. I want to encourage you guys to leave some feedback for us, maybe review us on iTunes, let us know what you think, and we'll see you guys on the next episode. Thank you.
See you guys.